Chapter 23, Winter Tribulations. The Legend of Sunset Shimmer, Majora's Mask. By Ganondorf 8. August 29, 2016. Chapter 23, Winter Tribulations. As I watched Cranky shuffle away in his bid to reach the temple, I doubted he would make it before the moon destroyed Termina. I was left with a decision that would affect how I would proceed with my own journey. I could follow Cranky, although would that be a good idea? I had to finish what Maud started, but was there something I needed before making the trek? If there was and I got up there without it, it'd mean going all the way back down to get it and wasting precious time. Going back to the village and playing that song for Featherweight so that he could fall asleep might give me the complete version. Cranky only remembered the first 6 notes, but then what would I use it for? Most of the Gorons were in the village aside from Cranky, Photo Finish, Sandalwood, and his brother were out in the mountains, so unless there were additional members that I didn't know about, I couldn't really see a use in playing a lullaby. I doubted those I listed would want to fall asleep given their circumstances. The village was also where I needed to find some rock sirloin to give to Photo Finish, but I didn't have a clue as to where I could start searching. Most Gorons had hidden their food according to what I learned, and they probably had no intention of sharing in their bid for survival. That left Fancy Pants and Tyrak, whose hearth was frozen, and left them unable to do business with anyone. Of all 3 conundrums, it was the latter that I could deal with first, as I was right next to a hot spring. It shouldn't take long for me to thaw out their hearth, and I could procure their services provided I had enough rupees. I had one other problem to deal with, and that was time itself. I had been walking, also rolling around, since the start of this 72-hour cycle, and my body was showing signs of fatigue. I'd wager that continuing down my current course would result in me collapsing from exhaustion and freeze to death because of the snow. I wanted to do everything at once before heading out for the temple, but it seemed that I had to wait until tomorrow morning, or earlier if I woke up before dawn broke, to assist both Featherweight and Photo Finish. I knew it wasn't the best idea, yet what other choice was there? Collapsing from exhaustion would mean the end of me and 2 worlds being lost forever.
Sunset?
Twilight asked, noticing that I was looking incredibly nervous.
Is something wrong? I just stressed myself out over having so many things to do.
I answered.
That has been a problem lately. Tell me about it. It's not really fair considering you only have 72 hours with which to do all you can before having to reset time. If you really wanted to, you could always complete your tasks in small bursts, but then that would take much longer, and it would also mean redoing certain things again so that other events can be triggered.
Twilight said. Her Highness certainly knew how to remind me of what happens when I reset time, but I wasn't about to make a big deal out of it. She was right on both accounts, so my only job was to grin and bear it until it was over.
You've got 3 options to consider, so which one will you handle first? I actually considered following Cranky to the temple, but I think I'll need something from the village. Do you remember what Diamond Tyara said? Something about a Goron guarding the temple?
I asked, scratching my head.
Good. You do remember. I was afraid you had forgotten and I'd have to explain things.
Twilight answered. I stuck out my tongue and blew a raspberry without her noticing my lack of maturity clearly showing, but quickly stopped upon realizing that she was right. I had forgotten.
Diamond Tyara said that someone named Big Oran guards the temple to make sure no one gains access to it. You might have to deal with him before being able to enter the temple, but it sounds like he's huge in size going by his name.
Twilight said. I remember him now. Big Oran was the Goron who forged the strongest sword I used in my previous journey. I felt embarrassed over forgetting about him.
I might have to play that song to make him fall asleep. Then it's imperative we go back to Goron village and help Featherweight out. Are you suggesting that I get the song first? Right now, that's your top priority above everything else. I know I sound like a hypocrite when I said you could choose what to handle first, but if we're going to save this world from being destroyed, we need to go back to the village and put Featherweight to sleep.
Twilight answered. She then noticed that I was twiddling my thumbs, resulting in her moaning as she rubbed her eyes with her hand.
Okay. What did you decide to do? I want to help Fancy Pants and Tyrak. You seriously want to help him more than a small child? Look, we've both had our experiences dealing with an evil version of Tyrak in the past, but in this world he's a smithy who happens to be devoid of any evil merits despite having a somewhat frightening appearance. Besides, I want to help them because it would allow goods and the like to flow again, something they need right now. Besides, I might be able to get them to help me make a stronger sword than the current one I've got.
I answered.
You can upgrade your sword. I did it before in Hyrule, although that involved using different swords and not the same one upgraded each time. Well, I guess you could make your sword stronger if it would make you feel better, but I would strongly recommend going back to the Goron village. In the end, however, this is your adventure, Sunset, so I'll follow whatever decision you make.
Twilight said. Her Highness was making it sound like I wasn't taking her advice seriously, but I always took what she said to heart. It's just that I believed that having a stronger sword would allow me to survive given that monsters were starting to become more powerful. Granted, my way of thinking was contradicted with the physical strength I possessed while as a Goron, but my current appearance wouldn't always be useful. I knew Twilight wished I could focus on the main objective, yet there were times where doing something on the side would result in being able to handle an important job better. Besides, getting some hot spring water to the mountain smithy wouldn't take that long at all. I just needed to roll over there within 2 minutes and melt the ice that covers their hearth just like that. Then I can roll back to Goron village and see Featherweight provided my body doesn't give out along the way due to exhaustion. My decision having been made, I turned to face the island that Pinkie Pie was still floating above. I was curious if she had been paying attention at all to me and Cranky having our delightful conversation before curling up into a ball and rolling up the slope with ease. This was actually a useful little tidbit of information. If there was a slope in the future that was too steep for me, I could roll up there instead. Once I dropped down into the hole and was back in the hidden hot spring, the warm sensation I felt from before started to affect my mind. Again, it was so beautiful given how the light that shimmered from each wall looked like the blazing sun I had come to love so much. Steam rising from the water made my eyes droopy, and the overall calmness was making me want to rest forever. No. I couldn't rest even if I wanted to. There were people surrounded by misery who needed my help to free them from such evil thoughts. Taking out my bottle, I walked over to the edge of the water, scooped some up, corked it, and put it away before turning towards the exit. Before leaving, I just had to take another look at the beautiful scenery that surrounded me. Compared to what I had already seen of Termina, a place like this hot spring showed that natural places still existed even in a world that was hanging on the verge of destruction. Stepping into the light and returning to the surface, I knew that I had about 2 minutes to get back to the smithies before the water cooled down and became regular water. I also had to consider avoiding any conversations until after melting the ice. Curling up into a ball again, I rolled forward, the snow giving me enough momentum to produce spikes across my body, plowing through the same blue tektites that frequented the area. I kind of felt bad for them being knocked away by a rolling Goron until I rolled into the mountain village. I continued rolling onward until I crashed into the back wall of the smithy's house, rubbing my head as I came out of my curled up state.
I really need to figure out how to stop on a dime,
I said as I got onto my feet.
Crashing into things must really take its toll on you, hey. Actually, I don't feel much pain, but I take that as having a sturdier body when in Goron form. That's true, as I doubt you would enjoy injuring yourself if you crashed into things as a human. In any case, you need to get inside and apply the hot spring water before it cools, otherwise you'll have to go back and try it again,
Twilight said. The thought of having to go back to get some more water was something I didn't want to do, so I quickly walked along the western wall of the house, and around the corner before Her Highness stopped me just as I was reaching out with my hand to grab the door handle.
You're not seriously thinking about going in there as you are right now, are you? What's wrong with that? You talked to Fancy Pants and Tyrek when you were a human. If you go in there as a Goron, they'll wonder why one of the mountain people has paid them a visit despite their business currently being at a standstill,
Twilight answered.
Since you put it that way, I guess I need to change back to normal,
I said. I checked to make sure that the bottle of hot spring water was still intact. It was, so that meant these bottles were capable of surviving crashes, although it's something I shouldn't be happy about. So then I grabbed at my face and pulled the Goron mask off, changing myself back into a human for the first time in what felt like forever. As the mask came off, I flipped my head back in relief, my hair flapping about in the wind, and regained my composure before putting it away. I reached for the doorknob and opened it, where it made a loud click followed by a creaking sound that broke the silence that billowed about. Inside, I could see Tyrek standing behind the desk like before, yet now he seemed confused given the expression on his face. Despite being the evil despot I fought before and whatever Her Highness experienced when she faced him, he looked completely harmless other than swinging around that giant hammer that could knock anyone's head off with one swipe. To the right, lying on the couch, was Fancy Pants, only now he was sound asleep, yet I could barely hear him mumbling under his breath about something that involved gold. It seemed things hadn't changed since my previous visit, but that was about to change thanks to bringing what they need to get their business running again. I looked to my left and saw the hearth, still in its frozen state. Upon a second glance at the chunk of ice that covered it, it was the same size as the chunk that I melted earlier that covered up the entrance of the hidden hot spring. I'd have been furious had the ice been bigger, as that would have meant going back and getting some more. Twilight bopped me on the head to remind me that I needed to do this quickly before the water cooled down, so I took a single step forward only for Tyrek to react to my presence.
You go, oh. You go.
Tyrek said in a booming voice.
Shut up.
Fancy Pants shouted as he stumbled to get up from sleeping.
Why did you have to go and wake me up, you Deku stick? I was dreaming about the pure gold that the Gorons keep to themselves when you had to open your mouth.
I could tell from his mannerisms that he was feeling really groggy, so I had to get him in a good mood. Otherwise, he would kick me out and I'd be unable to melt the ice.
Now, do you mind explaining what got you so excited? You go. You go. Hey? You say that girls come back?
Fancy Pants asked. He then rubbed his eyes before noticing that I was standing by the doorway, his slight jump into the air reaction of being surprised to see me.
Why are you here again, kid? I can appreciate you wanting to come here and get your sword improved, but I've got to say that you're really pushing the limits of my patience. Like I said before, I need to get this ice melted before I can do any work. Until the snow outside melts and spring comes, there's nothing I can do. You go, oh. The hot spring? I thought I told you that was just a rumor. I've got some right here,
I said, flashing the bottle of hot spring water before him.
Hey? You actually found a hot spring in these mountains? Unbelievable. How were you able to find something that doesn't exist? You know what, never mind. All I care about is you using that stuff to melt my hearth.
Fancy Pants said. He could have at least said please, but I supposed he cared more for his business than showing common courtesy. I walked up to the hearth and took a closer look at it. Despite how far advanced technology had gotten back in the world that I now called home, it was truly a sight to behold something that was used back in more simpler times. Aside from malfunctioning due to being frozen, using a hearth was a lot of fun, especially if you knew how to use one properly. I remembered back in Equestria during my early years as Princess Celestia's student. She took my class to one of Canterlot's premier museums where we saw a hearth much like this one but was more archaic. I was arrogant back then, but at least I had some interest because I felt using a hearth would make me better than every pony else. The tapping of Fancy Pants' foot told me that I was daydreaming, so I quickly shook my head, opened up my bottle, and poured its contents at the base of the ice. It melted away within mere moments, prompting Tyrek to react in his usual manner.
You go. You go, oh. You go.
Tyrek said.
It worked. That hot spring water has melted the ice. Now I can get back to work. You've done me a great favor, kid. I'm not sure how long it will take for the Gorons to make their way over here, but now they have a reason to get their goods moving again.
Fancy Pants said.
I don't think you'll be seeing them for some time,
I said.
What are you talking about? I recently visited their village and it looks like the cold weather has affected them more than anywhere else in the mountains. They are starving, freezing, and their elder has gone missing, leaving behind his son who can't stop crying.
I answered. I made sure not to tell him that I could become a Goron and learned of my information by directly talking to them. He wouldn't believe me and he'd think I had lost my mind from being out in the cold for too long.
That bad, hey? Well, I suppose there isn't much that can be done for them now. If only that Darmani fellow hadn't gotten herself killed, they'd be in a much better position instead of being on the brink of destruction.
Fancy Pants said. I looked at him with shock on my face. How did he know about Maud's death? The Gorons would never allow an outsider to learn something that important.
Why are you staring at me like that, kid?
Fancy Pants asked. It took me a few moments before I uttered words that stated that I wanted to know how he knew of her death. He then laughed in response.
Just because Gabora and I are humans doesn't mean we don't know anything about the Gorons. We live in the mountains just like they do, so news like that is bound to reach our ears, especially when their search party needed some supplies from us.
I felt foolish for even bringing it up, but it was over now and I learned something new in the process.
You go, oh.
Tyrek said.
Quite right, Gabora, quite right. Since our hearth has been thawed, I believe that we can now deal with you as a customer. Gabora, fetch our customer some coffee, quick like, and make sure mine is extra strong. How do you like your coffee?
Fancy Pants asked.
With milk?
I answered sheepishly.
Fair enough. Majora. Make sure her coffee has milk in it.
Fancy Pants said. ARandomAudiobookAppeared then turned around and walked to the back of the house. Each footstep he took felt like a small tremor was rattling the house, yet Fancy Pants appeared to shrug it off like it were nothing.
Majora may be a acoustic who stumbles about, but he makes some of the best coffee you'll ever experience in Termina. Now then, while he's preparing the refreshments, I want to take a better look at that sword of yours.
I felt a little nervous about handing over my sword to him, but the expression on his face was telling me that he could be trusted.
Are you afraid that I might break it or something? I had a previous experience,
I said, reminding myself of what happened to the old lady from the bomb shop. I know that I prevented the robbery from happening, but the fact that it happened impacted me when it came to giving my important items to someone else.
I can assure you that I won't do anything like that,
Fancy Pants said. I drew my sword from its scabbard and presented it to him, where he grabbed the hilt and looked at it from different angles like he were obsessed with it.
Now this is what I call a finely crafted weapon. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this in Termina. I've no doubt that this sword has served you well, but it can definitely be improved upon. You can forge it into a stronger weapon. More like reforge it so that it will have more attack power and have a much sharper blade. Normally, I'd charge 100 rupees to reforge swords, but I like you, kid, so I'll cut you a special deal. I'll make your sword stronger for merely 50 rupees. I can't go any lower than that, so consider this offer a steal.
Fancy Pants answered. 50 rupees. Even though it was cheaper than the original price, deep down I knew that I didn't have enough to pay him. That meant he was going to be downright furious because of how I strung him along without having adequate funds. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet, opening it up to show him that I didn't have enough money. At first, I couldn't bear to look because of what was about to happen, but a sudden noise of shock coming from Fancy Pants made me take a look for myself. To my surprise, my wallet was filled to near capacity with rupees, but how did I get my hands on them? Was it possible that when I rolled around as Darmani, I somehow picked up some loose rupees?
Guess I've got enough to pay you. Yep. You've definitely got 50 rupees, so why don't I take both those and your sword, and make it even better than ever?
Fancy Pants said. Even if I had the option to back out from this, I felt compelled to complete this transaction. He held out his hand to indicate that he wanted the rupees, so I took out enough that totaled 50 and deposited them in his hand, where he quickly pocketed them.
I should let you know before you leave that we'll be keeping your sword here for the night, so I suggest you don't go running into trouble. Come back here tomorrow morning and it shall be ready. You go. Oh. You go. You go.
ARandomAudiobookAppeared said, coming back with the coffee. He handed over one cup to Fancy Pants and the other to me before returning to his place behind the desk. I had to admit that the smell coming from the cup was really good. Guess ARandomAudiobookAppeared really knew how to brew some fantastic coffee.
Majora says that he will do his best to reforge your sword. You go. You go. Right. I'm off to work.
After finishing my coffee, I had to drink it quickly because time wasn't on my side. I prepared to leave without my sword, and took another look at Fancy Pants. Despite saying that he was about to get started on reforging my sword, he was just laying there as though he wasn't going to do anything. I had a feeling that it was ARandomAudiobookAppeared who did the actual work and hello AF around taking the credit. Or, he could be providing direction for ARandomAudiobookAppeared given his lack of smarts. In any case, there was nothing more for me to do other than come back tomorrow morning and seeing what my sword will look like once the work was done. I left the mountain smithy but pressed my ear up to the door in case they started to work on my sword the moment I left. Sure enough, I could hear the sound of ARandomAudiobookAppeared's hammer banging on something metallic, and that was enough proof I needed. It felt weird not having something to protect me, but it was worth it because it meant having a better weapon that would allow me to hold my own against the monsters.
Can you hear what they're doing in there?
Twilight asked.
I think they're working on reforging my sword now.
I answered.
Not sure why it will take until tomorrow morning to complete the process, but I suppose that they needed the time because of how foreign your sword is. In any case, you'll be going through these mountains unarmed, so I'd avoid any monsters until you get it back.
Twilight said.
I'm not completely defenseless,
I said as I took out the Goron mask.
That's right. As Darmani, you can hold your own in any battle by using your entire body as a weapon. Just don't get too used to that kind of power, Sunset. You won't be able to use the abilities of a Goron all the time, as some problems can only be solved as a human,"
Twilight said. Looking up at the cloudy sky above, I could tell that the sun was starting to set as the clouds had a yellow tinge to them. Had I really spent that much time in the smithy? I doubted that I could make it back to Goron village before nightfall came, and my body was starting to feel tired. Besides, if I took the time to get some rest, I wouldn't have to worry about getting used to not having my sword on hand. Since the hot spring outside the village had proven an ideal location for me to sleep, I knew that I had to get there as quickly as possible. It's not that I was afraid of the dark, but rather it gets really cold at night, and I didn't want to freeze or anything. The Gorons who were forced to sleep out in the cold had my sympathies. Putting on the Goron mask, I stumbled forward down the steps and onto the snow as my body reacted to the magic that was changing me. It was more painful than when I put on the Deku mask, yet I had to get used to it, especially when I have to switch between both forms at any given notice. Eventually, I let out a scream that no one heard and became a Goron again, although the transition left me slightly exhausted. Twilight asked me if I was alright and I nodded, despite wanting to drop down and sleep in the snow. I regained my composure, curled up into a ball, and began to roll forward towards the Twin Islands, spikes producing from my body once again courtesy of my magic.
"Did you see that? Most interesting, and it does confirm my initial suspicions." "How can you call that interesting? She just changed into an entirely different creature by putting a mask on her face. How did she acquire such a power?" Two figures had witnessed what transpired in front of the mountain smithy, and the tall figure appeared shocked at what she saw. She jumped down to a lower ledge in a fit of rage, but quickly realized her partner said something that piqued her curiosity and flew back up to an upper ledge where her partner had been writing something. "You just said that this confirmed your suspicions. What did Sunset do to reward such a notion?" "Take a look at this," the short figure answered, brandishing her book. It contained a series of complex calculations that would confuse most people, but the tall figure appeared more than capable of understanding what it meant. "When we saw Sunset in the swamp, she had taken on the form of one of those plant-like creatures. I initially assumed it nothing but a freak coincidence, but now I see there was a magical presence at work." "Magical?" "Yes. I sensed an aura that wasn't her own surrounding her body. It stemmed from her face, but I didn't understand at the time why that was. Upon seeing her transform into that rock-like creature, my suspicion has been confirmed. The mask that she put on contained the spirit of a creature who had recently passed away. That's how Sunset was able to become the plant from before. One of those creatures must have died and its spirit became sealed into a mask," the short figure answered. "So what you're saying is Sunset is living out the life of a dead creature by wearing a mask?" "Correct." "Color me intrigued. I never would have imagined Sunset relying on such a depraved method as that. Perhaps a small part of me still exists within her subconscious after all. A minor victory but important all the same." The tall figure looked down at the ground before looking back at her partner, her face exploding in delight upon having reached her own conclusion regarding the power of masks. "Do you think it's possible that I could harness such power if I wore one of those masks? Even though you're a demonic version of her, you're still Sunset Shimmer, so I'd definitely say yes. To be honest though, would you really want to change into one of those rock-like creatures? They don't look all that fast despite being capable of rolling away. Plus, you probably wouldn't like to have your beauty tarnished," the short figure answered. "Do you think I'm that petty?" the tall figure shouted, causing the short figure to start bursting into laughter. This prompted the tall figure to glare at her partner with eyes that could pierce into one's soul and uncover their darkest secrets. "I don't care about looks. All I care about is becoming more powerful and becoming the true Sunset Shimmer." The short figure continued laughing until the tall figure grabbed the book she had been writing in and tossed it down to the ground below. "Don't think it's funny now, do you? For a demon who seeks knowledge, you sure can be a real jerk sometimes." "You didn't have to do that," the short figure said as she jumped down to where her book landed in the snow. She picked it up, brushed off the excess snow, made sure that none of the pages had been damaged, and flew back up to where her partner was standing, arms folded. "I didn't mean to strike a nerve with you, but please don't toss away my book. We need it to ensure that we get everything we want." "Guess I overreacted. It takes time to not allow anger to blind you. Want to go back to that cursed desert? I know you didn't want to leave that place, what with the other Twilight being there, but you agreed to follow my lead. You sensed Sunset in these mountains, so I knew saying no wasn't an option. Besides, I doubt Twilight is going anywhere in the near future. She does have her own little problem to deal with that remains stagnant, what with us being sent back to the beginning of this 72-hour time period."
the short figure said.
If not for the fact that we're their demonic selves, not you, as you never spawned from the princess, we'd be losing our memories every time sunset starts over. By the way, you do remember those undead mummies who were surrounding that house? I don't know which cycle of time it will happen in, but I'm betting that they will get to her. I know you want her to become you again so that she can fulfill her desire for knowledge, but those creatures are guaranteed to take her.
The tall figure said.
Should they try? I'll rip them apart so much, I doubt anyone would be able to find any remnants. Looks like you do have a sadistic streak in you when you're not focusing on books. Twilight is my prey and no one will deny me that. Of course. So? Want to leave? Why so insistent about it? Because it's cold.
I had managed to make it back to the hot spring just as the sun finally settled down for the night. While I could have gone the rest of the way to Goron village by rolling, it was only a couple of minutes away. The sudden burst of cold wind that radiated throughout the Twin Islands area made it impossible to make an attempt. I still felt bad for the Gorons who were forced to endure the cold. If I could, I'd have gladly taken their place and allowed them to bask in warm splendor of the hot spring. But, I knew deep down that I had to survive, as I could save Snowhead from becoming a frozen wasteland. Once I had gotten myself comfy by resting my body up against a wall, I thought about taking my mask off and sleeping as a human, but part of me wanted to stay a Goron because of how unusual it was being a rock-like creature. Having powerful muscles was also a reason. As I slowly closed my eyes and began to dream, it didn't take long for me to experience a nightmare, the kind that often made me feel restless as I struggled to avoid succumbing to it. Within the subconscious of my dream, I was once again surrounded by fire. I was also a human and not a Goron, and I knew straight away that Ganondorf was going to pay me a visit so that he could once again torment me. To be honest, I had hoped he wouldn't bother me anymore, but I should have known someone that evil wouldn't shy away from bringing misery to someone because it was in their nature. As I tried to see beyond the flames, they had since flared up and were blinding my vision. A pair of eyes appeared before me. They were filled with a dread and a gaze that made me want to hide from them, but there was nowhere for me to hide. The gaze from the eyes pierced through my soul and could see everything about me. I knew at that point I was staring into the eyes of Ganondorf. Why had he appeared now when I hadn't dealt with him for a long time? This, along with many other questions, riddled my mind, yet there was no telling if I'd even get answers to them due to how cryptic he could be. What was truly bad was that Her Highness wasn't by my side.
Child. It has been some time since our last encounter.
Ganondorf said, his piercing gaze grew stronger and I couldn't help staring deep into them.
Why torment me now?
I asked.
Do not consider my visit to be a mere taunting of your misery. Okay, then what brings you to my dreams? People such as you are most vulnerable within the realm of dreams. They believe themselves protected from the darkness that surrounds them, but in truth they can be struck down without any mercy. I would gladly demonstrate this by making you suffer, child, but there is no need to do so through your subconscious. No, such a pleasure works best by doing so in person.
Ganondorf answered. Like before, his choice of words were a mixture of confusion and intimidation, but it seemed he had either slipped or intended for me to understand what he was talking about.
Tell me. Have you gotten stronger since our last meeting? Can't you tell? Such ignorance is most amusing. Even though your power is nothing compared to mine, I still believe you have the potential to become so much more. You may not think that way, but deep down your heart yearns for hatred. It yearns for the desire to crush all that oppose it through sheer power alone.
Ganondorf answered.
I'm not like that anymore. Heh. You cannot hide from the past, child, nor can you remove the taint that stains you. Taint? What taint? The taint of evil. It has existed within your heart since the day you learned that your family neglected you. It has been feasting on your hatred for others and your desire to be better than everyone else from your world. It grew alongside you until it manifested into the demonic form that eventually became its own entity.
Ganondorf answered. His eyes then started glowing and it felt like he was peering straight into my heart. I tried to do something to prevent him, but I went completely numb. As the eyes of the Dark Lord scanned my body, I could feel something inside trying to tear me apart. I didn't know what it was, but it felt unbearable.
Do you feel that, child? That is the taint of evil that was born from your hatred of those who abandoned you. I thought friendship saved me from that. No matter how much you do to change the perception others once had of you, your taint is forever a part of you. It can never be destroyed and shall remain with you until the day you die or choose to embrace its blessings.
Ganondorf answered.
I'll never embrace it. Heh. I knew that was going to be your answer. So then you shall die. What are you talking about? Have you gotten stronger, child? You did not answer my question and instead provided ignorance, but I could simply peer into your soul to determine if you have become stronger or remain weak and helpless.
Ganondorf answered. His eyes glowed even brighter than before, and again there was nothing I could do. His power was far too much for me to resist, and I felt like a newborn puppy, but then he began laughing, which didn't make much sense. I was completely at his mercy, yet he just laughed at my expense. That's when he revealed something that changed everything.
Ha! You forgot my ability to foresee the future.
That's right. Ganondorf knew what was going to happen long before it was even conceived. He knew that I was stronger and put me through painful torment, all because I forgot he possessed that kind of power. Unfortunately, the reverse wasn't true. I had no idea what kind of power he wielded apart from the fact that it far exceeded anything I was capable of unleashing. Ganondorf could be 3 times stronger than me, or even something like 10 times stronger, but in any case his strength was in a league of its own.
A little.
I answered. I wasn't sure what to say, so I went with something simple.
Do not think you can hide the truth from me. I am aware that you have been blessed with a new form. Your ignorance shall cost you your life, but perhaps you will survive long enough to provide me with some entertainment. You shall fight me again, child.
Ganondorf said. What? Was he being serious? I barely survived my previous encounter. Now he wants to fight me again? I felt sick to my stomach, but I knew he wasn't fazed by my actions.
Upon saving the mountain where the cold winds blow, you shall appear before me and we will have our contest. Your fate will be decided by my hand and mine alone. Do not attempt to run away, child, as you cannot escape. Remember these words.
Ganondorf's eyes disappeared into the flames that suddenly flared up, his laughter echoing all around me. The situation had gotten even worse than I had imagined. I tried to find a way to escape the flames, but every direction was blocked off as the flames grew larger in size. I found myself slowly being closed in on all sides, and I cowered in terrible believing that this was how it was going to end for me.
Wah!
I screamed, waking up from my sleep, and knocking Twilight, she had been sleeping on my hat, to the ground. I quickly crawled over to the water and looked at my reflection. My face was dripping with sweat.
Sunset?
Twilight asked as she started to come to from being rudely awakened.
Did you have another nightmare or something? It was horrible.
I answered, cupping my hands together, and splashing my face with hot spring water to calm my nerves.
Ganondorf appeared in my dreams and told me that he wishes to fight me again, and it will happen when the mountains have been restored. What?
Twilight exclaimed, my answer snapping her to attention.
If that's the case, then things are going to get seriously bad if the second giant is awakened. Is there anything you can avoid facing him? No. His power allows him to perform just about anything, so there's no point in even trying to run away. I'm so sorry, Sunset. I was already struggling with having to deal with his torments, but now I have to go toe-to-toe with him, all because he wants to see my daydream form that I told you I achieved during the friendship games. My past is showing no signs of fading away, Twilight. No matter what I do to move on from it, it continues to haunt me in new and horrifying ways.
I answered, tears streaming down my face. I felt like crying because of what had happened in my dreams, but then I felt the warm embrace from Her Highness as she pressed her tiny body up against my face. I could tell she was devastated.
What are you going to do? There's not much else I can do other than accept the fact that I've got a date with destiny.
I answered, getting back onto my feet. It wasn't the best analogy I could have come up with, but it was still appropriate given that Ganondorf was now waiting for me. To be honest, deep down I knew that I would have to fight him again. He still insisted on wanting me to embrace power, but I didn't expect it to happen so soon. If anything, I'd have guessed he would want to fight me after saving Termina from being destroyed and not before I achieved that goal. There was no point in trying to go back to sleep at that point. I didn't want to run the risk of having another nightmare, so I told Twilight that we would be heading to the village and help Featherweight get some much-needed rest. If anyone deserved not to be tormented, it was him, because a child didn't deserve to suffer. The only problem was that I didn't know what time it was, so there was a chance I'd be traveling about in the cold dead of night. I wish I had a watch or something that could provide an accurate time. After spending a couple of minutes regaining my composure, I walked over to the light that shone down from above, and floated back up to the surface. It was dark out and the intense cold wind immediately shook me to the bone. Was this what Gorons dealt with on a regular basis whenever the sun went down? Perhaps they were strong in spirit alongside being strong in body? Despite being in a Goron body, I struggled to keep warm, although I was more concerned with Cranky. Despite having years of experience, he was frail compared to the others, so had he succumbed to the intense cold? Photo finish, Sandalwood, and his brother most likely were holding their own, although probably begging to be someplace warm.
Judging from how dark it looks above, I'd say it's about 3 in the morning.
Twilight said as she observed the cloudy mass above us. Night of the first day, 51 hours remain.
How accurate do you think your guess is? I don't know, but it's better than not knowing at all. I'd have preferred to wait until morning, but my nightmare woke me up. I'm surprised Pinkie Pie is still floating about on her balloon. In fact, I'm surprised she hasn't frozen to death. I mean, all she's wearing is that green suit. I doubt it has insulation to keep her warm in these wretched conditions.
Twilight said. We both looked up at her and were surprised that she was actually sleeping out in the cold whilst floating above the ground with that balloon of hers. There was no point in trying to figure it out. Bending reality came natural to her, so I walked forward only to stop due to a sudden burst of cold coming out of nowhere and chilling my bones to the core. I folded my arms in an attempt to keep myself warm.
Where did that come from?
I asked through chittering teeth.
I'm not sure, but I suggest you get to the village before it gets worse.
I could have curled up into a ball and rolled my way there, but I decided to run as fast as my body was able to. The village certainly looked different at night, what with there being no outdoor lights to help show the way. If not for the snow, I'd be running around blind, but a familiar-looking face nearby was a sigh of relief.
Darmani, why are you out here in the middle of the night?
Diamond Tyra asked.
Me? What about you?
I asked as I walked up to her.
I thought you would be inside with the others. I took an hour-long break from my duties, but it wasn't all that fun considering the elder's son continues to cry. To be perfectly frank, I prefer to be out here as the cold is much more tolerable than the crying inside. I may sound nasty, but it's for my own peace of mind.
Diamond Tyra said. She then noticed that I was shivering, so she walked over and placed her hand on my shoulder, making me feel slightly more comfortable.
I'm not surprised that you feel so cold right now, Darmani. It's so unbearable. Ever since the cold winds started blowing from the direction of the temple, traveling about the region especially at night is tantamount to suicide. You never know when the wind will start to blow, so all you can do is hope that you don't get caught.
Diamond Tyra said.
I don't think the elder will survive out there. You don't need to worry about him.
Diamond Tyra said. Was she being serious? The elder was more frail than either one of us, and someone of his age shouldn't be walking around in such horrible conditions. I meant no disrespect to him because of his age, but he should know better because of it. Diamond Tyra began laughing before she patted me on the back several times.
The elder has been through worse conditions than this, not entirely this bad mind you, but you know what I mean, so don't expect him to die out there. Speaking of which, were you able to find him?
I nodded my head and she squealed with glee.
I knew you would be able to do it, Darmani. Did he mention anything about coming back? The elder has no intention of returning until he finds out what's going on at the temple. Really?
Diamond Tyra's expression went from happy to sad in mere moments.
I suppose he must complete his mission since he is the patriarch of the village. A shame really, as he really could do with him putting his son to sleep. The elder is only going up to the temple because the one who was supposed to.
She then stopped upon realizing that I was the one who was supposed to go up there.
I'm the one who was supposed to go there. Then you should go into the shrine and see if you can calm down the elder's son. I'm hoping that he was able to teach you the song, otherwise you won't be able to do anything and the others will only get worse. You did learn that song, right?
Diamond Tyra asked.
He only gave me the first 6 notes. What? How could he have forgotten? Well, I hope that his son remembers the rest of the melody. I'll quickly open up the entrance so you can get in there and do what you need to do.
Diamond Tyra said.
Before you do, I have a question. What's that? There's a Goron I ran into at the mountain village who needs some top rock sirloin as her supposedly last meal, but she's trapped on a high-up ledge and doesn't have the strength to come down of her own volition,"
I said. Diamond Tiara then looked at me with a puzzled expression. Did she not know which Goron I was talking about? Surely, she didn't believe everyone looked the same. There were some slight similarities, but they had their distinct features.
She was wearing a frog-like mask on her head. Photo finish? What in the rocky crevasse is she even doing there? I thought she came back to the village days ago,"
Diamond Tiara said. She mumbled something under her breath that I couldn't understand, but she quickly turned to me all while slapping her forehead.
"I know she means well, but she can be thick-headed like a boulder. If she needs a last meal, as you say, though I doubt she'll die out there. I do know that one Goron hid some sirloin in the chandeliers above the meeting place. I'm not which part of the chandelier he hid his stash in, but it's top-quality rock sirloin, perfect for photo finish."
Diamond Tiara curled into a ball before jumping into the air and crashing down onto the ground. The force of her impact opened the door, so I immediately thanked her for all the help and dropped down the side of the cliff to the floor below. A burst of cold wind caught me as I fell and I got flung into a large snow mound nearby, but luckily I got back onto my feet and entered the shrine just as a loud clicking sound coming from behind signaled the door closing. My ears once again heard the crying sounds coming from Featherweight, but this time I knew what needed to be done. As I walked up the pathway that led to the meeting place, I looked up at the chandelier that Diamond Tiara mentioned. It consisted of 6 clay spheres that looked extremely brittle. Cracks in them indicated a heavy object could shatter them to pieces connected to a center, but since I didn't know where that Goron had hidden his food, I had to smash each one until I found the rock sirloin photo finish needed. While helping her out wasn't necessary, she would give me a mask in exchange for giving her a meal. Sure, it sounded like an unfair trade on her part, but she was willing to give me anything in return, even if it was just a mask. My focus broke when the sound of crying echoed throughout the chamber. Gorons all around were holding their ears so hard, it looked like they were on the verge of squeezing their heads just so they could relieve themselves. I walked to the back and saw that Featherweight hadn't changed since my last visit. He was still crying up a storm, yet I was surprised he had gone this long without taking a break. The Goron who was standing nearby looked at me with sadness in his eyes. That look made my own heart ache. I knew what needed to be done, so I took out my drums and was about to play when Featherweight interrupted.
"Ya. Hun, ugh. You why? Diddy. Hun. I'm cooled. Diddy."
Featherweight cried. He then opened his eyes and noticed that I was standing there, drums ready to play the song that would finally get him to fall asleep.
"Darmai. Did you bring him? Did you bring Daddy home? You said that you would."
I didn't have the heart to tell him that his father wasn't returning, but I couldn't deny information that important. I told Featherweight that his father wishes he could be here with him, but had to continue on with his journey to the temple. The news wasn't taken very well.
Ya. There's no need to continue crying,"
I said.
You promised to bring my daddy home. He insists on going to the temple, but he'll never make it at this rate. No, I must go there and finish what I started. In the meantime, there is something that I can do for you courtesy of your daddy." Before he continued with his journey, I was asked by him to play you this song. "I'm sure you'll feel a lot better once I've played it,"
I said.
But, hun. Why? Daddy.
There was no point in trying to reason with a child when they were in such a state. Quickly remembering the exact notes that Cranky played on his drum, I played the song by beating the appropriate drum, hoping that Featherweight would be able to give me the remaining notes I needed. At first, nothing happened when he heard the notes, but then he got up onto his feet and looked at me with a puzzled look.
"What's wrong?" "That song. That's the song Daddy always plays for me before I go to sleep. But it's not the entire song. Did Daddy forget the remaining notes? I'm sure he didn't do it on purpose, but he has been really stressful lately,"
Featherweight answered. This had me thinking. Was he aware that the real Darmani had died after falling into the chasm below the temple, or was his innocence making him immune to the awful truth? No. I doubt he knew. A child this young should never be told something that horrible, even if it meant preventing any kind of mental anguish later in life. It was the least I could do.
"Here, I'll sing the next part, Darmai,"
Featherweight said. He then began to sing in a beautiful voice, surprising me as I never would have guessed the first 6 notes Cranky taught me, but then sang an additional 2 notes before repeating it and turning it over to me. I was expecting half a dozen more notes that created a very complicated song, yet all I needed were 2 notes. Somehow, I felt annoyed for having to go through a few hurdles just for a mere 2 additional notes, but at least I now had everything I needed. I played all 8 notes before playing them again, followed by Featherweight singing them. As he sang each note, another vision appeared before me depicting both father and child as Cranky appeared from the haze, picked up his son, and cuddled him with a loving embrace that could only be realized by a parent. Just seeing such a wondrous display brought tears to my eyes, yet what was truly important was that Featherweight had finally stopped crying. The melody made him drowsy, but he looked like he was trying very hard to not fall asleep. His chances were slim as no Goron could resist such a melody.
Feel any better? Yes. I do feel a lot better now, Dharmai. Thank you for playing the Goron's lullaby. So that's what it's called. I don't know why Daddy wanted you to know this song, but I am sure you'll know what to do with it.
Featherweight said. He was getting more and more drowsy by the second and began tilting left and right as the magic within the melody was taking full effect.
It's just like Daddy's. Right. Beside me.
Featherweight then curled up into a ball, and fell asleep, his gentle snoring echoing all around. He looked absolutely adorable and I thought about coddling him like a proud mother, but then his snoring was suddenly overshadowed by a more obnoxious sound. I looked behind me and saw that the Goron who was standing there had also fallen asleep.
That lullaby is a lot more powerful than I thought,
Twilight said.
How come it hasn't affected me? I think it's because you're not a proper Goron despite currently having the body of one. That should prove useful when you have to play the lullaby in front of Big Oran if he doesn't allow you to get past him and into the temple.
Twilight answered.
Guess coming back here was essential. Hold on a second. I want to see something first.
Twilight said. She flew off into the darkness, leaving me to wonder what had gotten her so excited.
Sunset? Come over here and take a look at this.
She sounded like it was serious, so I put away my drums and walked over to the meeting place, discovering the Gorons were sound asleep. I was surprised at how much range those drums possessed.
No doubt those drums echo much better than the ocarina. This could be useful. I noticed something as well. What's that? This torch to our left wasn't burning when we came by a few minutes ago.
I answered. Did the power of the song cause the torch to ignite? In any case, it was providing some much-needed warmth. There were additional torches near the entrance that looked like they wanted to be lit as well.
I wonder what will happen if I light up all of those torches. Only way to know is to try. Oh, you should know that you can't use Deku sticks while as a Goron, so you'll have to do this as a human. If you're worried about revealing your true identity by taking off your mask, then don't, as the Gorons are likely to remain asleep for quite some time.
Twilight said. At least that was one problem that wouldn't become an issue, yet did I have a Deku stick on hand? First of all, I grabbed my face and pulled as hard as I could, taking off the Goron mask. I also tilted my head back, allowing my hair to flow about and became human again. I then rummaged through my items in hopes that I had a Deku stick on hand. I didn't have one. That meant going to the swamp and searching for a Deku Baba in hopes that cutting one down would give me what I needed. I didn't want to do any more unnecessary backtracking, so in my frustration I picked up a nearby pot and smashed it against the wall. I was surprised at seeing a Deku stick falling out of the pot upon impact. I wasn't about to knock it. I needed a Deku stick to light up the remaining torches, so I picked it up, plunged it into the flames, and ran down the path back to the entrance, lighting the torches one by one until they were all burning brightly. Upon lighting the last one, a strange whirling sound came from above. I looked up and saw the chandelier had begun to spin around. It was making a loud racket but not enough to wake up the Gorons.
That was kind of pointless, Twilight. Maybe, but perhaps the sphere that contains the rock sirloin can now be easily reached. How am I supposed to get it? Do you remember seeing that small ramp up there where the Gorons gather? I'm willing to bet that if you rolled off of that ramp as Darmani, you should be able to smash into those spheres, breaking them in the process. I don't know which sphere contains the sirloin, so it involves guessing.
Twilight answered.
Wouldn't smashing them wake the Gorons? I doubt it. They're sleeping so loudly, it would take something exceptionally loud to wake them.
Walking back up the path wasn't so bad as now I could bask in the warmth coming from the torches, but when I reached the meeting place, I noticed something that I either didn't pick up on before or I simply ignored it. The red carpet was frozen. Despite it not looking that way, I tapped my foot on it, making a pinging sound. Could this give me enough momentum to roll off of the ramp? Yes, provided that I start rolling from a good enough distance. Taking out the Goron mask, the eyes on it looked derpish. I put it on and began to go through the usual transition. I wondered if this would happen to anyone else who put these masks on their faces, or that it was only restricted to me. It was something to consider in case I needed more than one form to solve a specific problem. My body was beginning to change shape as the magic took effect, and I screamed out loud. The Gorons didn't hear a thing before becoming Darmani again. I'll never understand why screaming is part of the transformation. It feels rather silly in my opinion. I walked into the shadows that lead to Featherweight, stopping halfway because I didn't need to go all the way back. I had to make sure that I was aiming for the chandelier in a straight line, otherwise I'll most likely careen off the side and land somewhere else. Who knew that rolling around as a Goron required precise calculations? My assumption was that they just rolled somewhere and hoped they would hit their target. Curling up into a ball, I waited until the sphere on the chandelier I wanted to hit. There were 6 of them, and I picked one that spoke to me before rolling forward, the ice acting like snow, thus giving me the momentum necessary to produce spikes on my body. In a matter of seconds, I rolled off the ramp and smashed into the sphere. A strange object came out and dropped to the ground. Upon impact, I rolled into a wall and came to a complete stop.
Did you see that, Sunset? Something came out of the chandelier. You must have luck on your side, as that's the rock sirloin that you need to give to photo finish,
Twilight said. I walked over to where it had dropped and took a closer look. It looked like one of those pieces of meat they serve back home attached to the bone, yet you could tell that the meat was rock that had been grinded down. My mouth started to water as I continued to gaze at the sirloin, so Twilight bopped me on the head and I realized that I had the desire to eat it for myself.
Get a hold of yourself. As a Goron, the smell coming from that sirloin is making you hungry. I don't want to eat that. Gorons eat rocks all the time, as you told me before, so it's natural that you feel a tremendous hunger coming from within your stomach. You know, I feel really bad about taking this sirloin. I mean, some Goron put it up there in the chandelier for safekeeping, and here I am stealing it from him or her just so that I can give it to someone who shouldn't have ended up the way she did. Do I sound like a bully when I think about it that way?
I asked.
Think about it this way then. Even though you're stealing, it's for a good cause, as photo finish could potentially die out there. Also, when you reset time, things will go back to normal before we even arrived. The sirloin will still be stashed away and whoever put it in the chandelier won't be none the wiser.
Twilight answered. What she failed to grasp was that resetting time meant photo finish would be back to being up on that ledge shivering and hungry. No. I shouldn't doubt Her Highness. She knew better than most about such things because of what she dealt with as a princess.
I don't think I can put this sirloin away. How about carrying it around? Are you sure I can do that? Gorons have tremendous strength, so you should have no problems carrying that sirloin around. The only problem I can see is that you won't be able to defend yourself in case a monster decides to attack you. Also, I don't think the Goron who hid the sirloin had any extra pieces stashed away, so you've got one shot at this.
Twilight answered. That wasn't very reassuring, but I supposed when it came to food, there weren't any second chances, especially if someone was desperate for some. I grabbed the rock sirloin and lifted it up with no effort above my head. It was surprisingly light, although I attribute that to having so much strength, and walked towards the entrance of the shrine. Like before, it was closed, so I pounded my fists in hopes Diamond Tiara would hear me. It opened several moments later.
You managed to find some rock sirloin?
Diamond Tiara said as I walked outside. I took a few more steps forward, turned, and looked up to see her staring down at me.
Judging from the smell, that's top quality you've got there in your hands, Darmani. Photo finish was very adamant about it being like this,
I said.
Ugh. She always demanded the very best sirloin. I take it that she's picky. Most Gorons sadly are like that these days. In the past, our ancestors would eat any kind of rock, no matter the quality. Over time, the idea of only consuming the best became integrated in our society, and now most of us will only eat rocks from Dodongo's cavern.
Diamond Tiara answered. This world had a cavern filled with those monsters too? I guessed some things between the two worlds were the same.
Some Gorons will eat anything, and I envy them for that. Anyway, you should get that to photo finish before she freezes out there, but make sure she actually gives you a good reward for your work.
Thanking her once again, I turned around and started to make my way towards the entrance of the village. As I walked, I began to think about what Diamond Tiara didn't do. She never warned me of the dangers beyond the village or tried convincing me to stay until morning. Was Maud really that strong amongst the Gorons that she could take care of just about anything without getting herself overwhelmed? Well, it wasn't anything I should feel offended over. I reached the entrance and walked through the tunnel to the Twin Islands area. It was still dark out, although it had gotten a bit lighter, and so far, nothing had chosen to attack me, which was good, as carrying this rock sirloin did make me feel somewhat ridiculous. When a white wolfo suddenly popped up from the snow, I was reminded that I should know better than to think that nothing would go wrong. I thought about putting the sirloin down and fighting it, but I couldn't afford to keep photo finish waiting. My only option was to keep going and take the damage as it came, provided the white wolfos didn't do something stupid like sliding down a slope. It ran towards me while I walked towards it, before slashing my chest with its sharp claws. My stomach may have been bulky, but it was still pretty sturdy, resulting in me wincing with pain as I kept going. It started to follow behind, but I ignored it as photo finish needed me. It began slashing me in the back. Each swipe brought more and more pain. I think it eventually caused me to draw blood, and Twilight started to suggest I put the sirloin down and fight back. I was determined to get to my destination, even if it meant getting clawed to pieces. Fortunately, the white wolfos got bored over time and decided to look elsewhere, leaving me free to continue. That was short-lived when a blue tektite appeared and jumped into me from the front. I almost dropped the rock sirloin into the snow, but managed to keep hold of it and continued walking across the remaining bridge and into the mountain village. My body felt pretty banged up, what with being clawed and slammed, but it was nothing compared with what I experienced back in Hyrule. In that journey, I almost died at least a dozen times or so. At least the worst part was now over, as getting over to photo finish should be simple enough.
Why didn't you fight back?
Twilight asked.
If I had, I might not have gotten to photo finish in time. Yes, I suppose that's a valid enough reason. Besides, those wounds weren't really all that bad. And the blood coming from your back. It will heal quickly, I think. I know it sounds like I'm not being very reassuring, but this body is way more durable than my actual body. It's a shame that I'll only be able to experience this until we change everything back to normal. It would make going up against evil magic more tolerable.
I answered. Twilight chuckled, prompting me to do the same. Okay, so I wasn't confident about fighting evil magic. It doesn't come up quite as often as what Her Highness has to go through, but it'd be nice to have some better protection. I continued onward past the mountain smithy, only to come to a stop when a familiar called down from on high.
Hey you! Yes, you! The Goron holding that succulent rock sirloin above your head.
I looked up and saw photo finish gazing at me, her eyes wide open, fixated on what I held above my head. She looked like she was desperate to get something in her stomach.
I'm not sure why you're lugging that thing around in the open, but would you be so kind as to toss it up here? I haven't anything in what feels like forever. Actually, that's the reason I brought it here. It is. I don't remember seeing you saying that you would bring me food.
Photo finish said. Crap. When I spoke to her before, I was a human, yet now I was a Goron. No wonder she looked so confused. She never saw me like this.
Some girl in green gave this to me,
I said, trying my best to sound convincing and fix the blunder I made.
A little schnitzel like that came by earlier and said she'd bring me some food. Was she too afraid to see me, photo finish, again? No. Perhaps she didn't want to deal with a Goron whose life hangs ever so closer to the brink of starvation.
Photo finish asked. Even in this world, I could tell that she was just as hammy as always with her words.
Enough. So, will you give me that food you carry? I'll give you something very nice in return. What do you want me to do with it? Toss it up here.
Photo finish answered. With my Goron strength, I easily tossed the sirloin up onto the ledge, where it landed with a loud thud. The sound of scuffling followed, indicating that she gotten her hands on it.
Yeah. I've no doubt about it. This is Dodongo Cavern's finest quality rock sirloin. I've dreamt about eating some for a very long time. This is my absolute favorite.
As I stood there, the sounds of chewing could be heard coming from the ledge, followed by consistent swallowing. Bits and pieces of rock came flying, splattering across the snow, and it made me want to throw up. You would think she would have better manners.
That was the best meal I've ever had. My energy has returned to me. Glad to hear that. I come. You what? I'm coming down so that I can properly thank you, Schnitzel. Wait one moment. Now, I come.
Photo finish answered. All of a sudden, she came rolling off the ledge and I had to jump to the side to avoid being bowled over. She then rolled around for a few seconds before stopping in front of me and uncurling herself.
Oh. I wondered who it might be. Why if it isn't Darmani? You are alive? Didn't the elder say you died? As you can see, I'm alive and well. Yes, I see. That is the reason why you knew my favorite food. Only the real Darmani knew that rock sirloin from Dodongo's cavern is my absolute favorite food. Okay, it's what most of us prefer, but my point still stands.
Photo finish said.
Do you think you can make it back to the village? It may be cold out right now, but I've got the strength to make it there.
Photo finish answered. She curled into a ball and was about to roll away when she stood back up.
Oh, I almost forgot. Please accept this as a token of gratitude.
She took off the frog-like mask she wore on her head and presented it to me.
This is Don Gero's mask. He is a famous frog composer who directs the frog choir who are well known through Snowhead. Every spring, they appear in this area and perform for any who happen to pass by. It was crafted so well that no one would even think twice if you were to direct the choir. Thank you,
I said as I took the mask from her hands. It certainly looked unique, what with the frog hands and feet on the bottom of the mask. I wasn't sure how this would be useful in changing this world back to normal, but I accepted the mask anyway because I'd be rude if I didn't.
I hope that spring will come soon so that I can hear the frog's enthusiastic performance. I've got to succeed in my mission first. Then go. Go now. Save us all.
Photo finish said. She curled up into a ball and rolled away at an incredible speed until she was out of sight. I didn't really need her to give me a pep talk, especially one that sounded like she was demanding. In any case, I now had everything I needed to get to the temple and find out what was causing all this snow. Well, almost everything. I still needed to wait for my sword to be reforged into a better weapon. There were still a couple of hours remaining until the sun came up, yet I did have enough strength to handle whatever awaited me at the temple. But, what if I needed my sword to do things that Goron fists couldn't? I didn't want to run the risk of running into a problem that required a sword. It looked like I was going to have to wait until sunrise before I could continue onward. End of chapter.